Hemi-motored Cudas and Challengers were awesome cars, but the ones with the little 340 engines became Trans Am racers. By 1970, the muscle car phenomenon had grown to immense proportions, and so had the muscle car. The cars were larger and heavier than ever before, and they were loaded with luxury options. And practically every one had a 450 cubic inch engine. In short, muscle cars were starting to look a lot like the full-size cars that ruled the road before 1964. But there was another type of performance car that still offered lightweight, nimble handling, and sexy styling. All the things that had turned on young America about the muscle cars. They were called pony cars. The pony cars were billed as America's version of European sports cars, but they had a definite Detroit flavor. The Cuda and the Challenger were two of the most successful executions on the pony car theme. Since the introduction of the Mustang and Camaro, Chrysler had settled for third place in sales in this attractive market segment. But the 1970 Cuda and Challenger were gonna change all that. Their styling was immaculate, and their range of available engines, which included everything in Chrysler's inventory, made sure that Dodge and Plymouth lovers could do just about anything they wanted with this car, including going racing.
Chrysler Corporation stepped up in 1970 to compete in the Trans Am series, and really that just shows how competitive the pony car marketplace was more than anything else. I think all the manufacturers knew that if you were going to play in the pony car market, then you had to race the cars.
Trans Am racing was custom tailored for pony cars to go fender to fender with each other on America's finest road courses. This heads-up racing series had been raging on for several years, with Ford, GM, and even American Motors spending millions of dollars on full-tilt factory racing efforts. With all the media exposure and fan enthusiasm the series generated, the automakers thought it was worth every penny. Trans Am was about the only racing series that Plymouth and Dodge hadn't participated in. But by 1970, they wanted some of this action. Even though Ford and GM had a few years lead in car development, Chrysler Corporation called in some big-time help. And in a short time, they put together two first-class racing programs. Champion race driver Sam Posey recalls the excitement of being asked to form a team to race the Dodge Challenger.
Autodynamics was awful proud when we were signed by Dodge. We had almost been signed by American Motors about a month before, and had done quite a lot of the preliminary work with the Javelin deal in mind. And I mean, we just couldn't wait to strap these big fat things on and get out there and run into people.
With Sam Posey's Autodynamics fielding a Challenger and Dan Gurney's All-American Racers preparing two Cudas, Dodge and Plymouth then hit the market with special editions of these cars, which had road racing suspensions, big, bold graphics, and the lightweight, high-revving 340 engine. Dodge's special edition of the Challenger was called, appropriately enough, the TA. Plymouth called their car the AAR Cuda, after Dan Gurney's All-American Racers. Both cars were high style, high visibility, and loaded to the max with go-fast hardware. Young America took notice, and soon the big battle in Trans Am wasn't on the track, it was at the Mopar dealerships. Less than 3,000 copies of each car was ever made, and the people who got their hands on one knew they had something special. These cars would soon become some of the most collectible pony cars of the entire era. But could fantastic cars like these possibly have an economy car heritage? Well, yes and no. We'll start with the Cuda and its not-so-racy beginnings when the American muscle car returns. It had been 6 years since Plymouth had introduced the Barracuda, and they had been wild years. What had started as a fun little exercise of putting high-revving little V8s into sporty little cars had become the fastest growing and most lucrative part of the entire automobile industry. The Barracuda had been upgraded from its original design, and it was now a pretty heavy-duty ground pounder. Like the Mustang, which traced its roots back to the Ford Falcon, the Barracuda had been created from an equally slow, unexciting little car called a Valiant.
Chrysler Corporation has the last word. Valiant.
The Barracuda was actually introduced a few weeks before the Mustang, but it looked so much like the compact car from which it was derived that many people actually mistook it for a Valiant. It took Plymouth 3 years to correct this misconception. When they did, the little lightweight Barracuda became more of a sports car than either the Mustang, the Camaro, or the Firebird. But the rule even for pony cars was now go big or stay home. Ford and GM had started this cubic inch race by putting big block engines in the Mustang and the Camaro. But Chrysler could bring more motor to the party than any other kid on the block. They had the Hemi. Unless you were Ronnie Sox or a handful of other racers, the 426 Hemi and the 68 Barracuda wasn't something you could just walk into your Plymouth dealer and buy. It was, however, a little reminder from Plymouth to all the other pony cars that they could be just as serious about going fast as anyone else. Mopar's racing experience had also developed ultra heavy-duty driveline components. Their sure grip rear ends and bulletproof 4-speed and automatic transmissions could handle the torque output from any Mopar engine, no matter how wild. Drivetrain breakage in Chrysler products was practically unheard of. But amid all the muscle car smoke and noise, Chrysler introduced a little high-winding small block that was the best-kept secret of 1968, their new 340 cubic inch engine. This engine used a 4.04-inch bore and a short 3.31-inch stroke. With a 445 lift cam, 10.75 compression, and a single Carter 4-barrel carburetor, it was underrated at 275 horsepower at 5,000 RPM. With its lightweight and quick revving ability, the 340 Barracuda offered agility and handling, as well as acceleration. In fact, thanks to their curb weight of 3,100 pounds, 340 Barracudas could run the quarter mile within an eyelash of other pony cars with much bigger engines. The street crowd had been calling the car Cuda for several years. So in 1969, Plymouth formalized the nickname as an option package. And now, you could even order the 440 engine in the Cuda, which was a textbook case of overkill. But after 3 years, the Cuda's body was ready for an upgrade. The new Cuda for 1970 would be an awesome muscle car and an equally good road racer. Stay with us as the third-generation Cuda hits the streets on the American muscle car. Nothing about the 70 Cuda could be traced back to any economy car. For 1970, Chrysler's designers gave it a body that turned the Cuda into the sexiest pony car on the road. The designers gave the Cuda one other thing in 1970, a running mate. The Dodge Challenger, along with the Cuda, were Mopar's new E-bodies. Their surface similarity hid many differences in the two cars, but they were both designed to hold any engine in Chrysler's inventory, from the Slant 6 to the 426 Hemi. Even though muscle cars still played the bigger is better game in 1970, there were some people out there who remembered what the pony car was originally designed to be. These people didn't have anything against straight-line acceleration. They just thought turning corners was fun too. For them, the new E-body car was a gift. If you could take your eyes off the Challenger and the Cuda's new body for a minute, you found a host of new suspension items underneath that made these cars excellent road machines. In addition to larger torsion bars, the cars featured big front and rear anti-roll bars, bigger brakes, and heavy-duty shocks and leaf springs. According to Sam Posey, the street Cudas and Challengers had a very similar feel to the ones he raced.
It feels a lot like the real racing cars did. It has the same harshness of ride. You can feel the ride. It has the same rumbly sound. It has the same kind of Spartan quality to the interior, the same heavy steering. Not quite any of those things to the degree that was felt in the real racing cars, but a good hint of it, a whiff of it.
A little extra attention to the car's suspension was a good move, because Chrysler Corporation was about to take these cars up against GM and Ford in the Trans Am series.
They really had to get on the ball to develop this car. Like I say, finding out late in '69 and having to just haul to get the thing done, and they put it all together and had to, of course, produce the street version to be able to run in the series. And so there was they were running around frantic for a while there.
With racing preparations underway, Dodge and Plymouth now went to work designing street versions of these Trans Am race cars. Like the Z28 and Boss 302 Mustang, the AAR and the TA would have a definite road racer flavor, which would set them apart from the other Cuda and Challenger models. Thanks to Plymouth's relationship with Dan Gurney, it was a natural that their car would have Gurney's All-American Racers logo on it, so it became the AAR Cuda. Dodge wanted something a little more in your face, and since Pontiac had already taken the name Trans Am, they settled for the initials TA. Plymouth decked out its Cuda with eye-catching graphics, which included a laser stripe down the side of the car, the All-American Racers logo, and a blackout hood treatment, which also blacked out the tops of the front fenders. Dodge also gave the Challenger a blackout hood treatment, and its side stripes incorporated the letters TA. The Challenger also featured a large 340 six-pack fender decal, just in case you didn't know who you were messing with. Both cars had ducktail rear spoilers, and each car sported a fiberglass hood. The Cuda's hood scoop was a low-drag item inspired by NASA designs, and the Challenger's was a more traditional Mopar Superstock-looking piece. Under each hood was a jewel, a special heated-up version of the Little 340. In addition to a stronger block, the AAR and TA's 340 engine mounted special cylinder heads, stronger rocker arms from the 426 Hemi, and improved valve train oiling. On top of the engine sat a trio of Holley 2-barrel carburetors on an Edelbrock aluminum intake manifold. The Pax air cleaner sealed to the scoop with a rubber gasket to draw in fresh air. To make the car legal for Trans Am racing, Chrysler had to make 2,800 Cudas and 2,500 TAs. Such a small production run made these cars in extremely short supply at the dealerships. Those who got one discovered that this was no ordinary pony car. We'll meet some of those people when the American Muscle Car returns. With less than 6,000 of these little street screamers in the pipeline, Mopar fans consider themselves extremely lucky to just get a ride in a TA Challenger or an AAR Cuda.
After I did the research on the car and found out what the car was, I knew I had something.
The 346 pack, the style of the car, the lines on it, really got my attention. And I didn't realize till I got this car how enjoyable it is to drive.
Challenger and AAR Cuda interiors were typical pony cars, with bucket seats, a console, large, easy-to-read gauges, and a custom steering wheel. You had your choice of either the Torque Flight Automatic or the Chrysler 833 4-speed Trans, with Mopar's pistol grip shift handle. Most cars came with power steering, power brakes, and the Music Master AM radio. Most dealers never received more than 2 or 3 of them, and there were so few AAR Cudas and TA Challengers ever made that buyers couldn't even special order them. If you wanted one, you took whatever the dealer had on the showroom floor. But The AAR and the TA were already loaded with all the trick features that their buyers wanted anyway.
These cars also featured side exit exhaust, which is very unusual. What happens is the exhaust comes back from the manifold, runs into a muffler, and then actually turns around and comes back forward and sticks out the side.
By the time Dodge and Plymouth had put on the finishing touches, they had made two little boulevard racers that were easily the equal of anything from GM or Ford. With the stripes and decals, the special handling, and the throaty exhaust, and even the two different size tires, these cars were exactly what the pony car thing was all about.
They were just perfectly shaped. The graphics were perfect. They had the high impact colors, fiberglass hoods. They looked like one-to-one scale Hot Wheels.
While Dodge and Plymouth were building enough street cars to satisfy SCCA's minimum production requirements, work had been continuing on putting together a racing program. Now that they had enough street versions, it was time to go to the track.
Dodge and Plymouth were late to the game in '70. They missed out on critical development time. Their efforts were incredible for a first-year team.
In choosing Dan Gurney's All-American Racers and Sam Posey's Autodynamics, Chrysler gave themselves a powerful 1-2 punch in the Trans Am series. Not only were they savvy racers, they were fierce competitors, even with each other.
Autodynamics found out that Gurney was acid dipping, and so we went and said, well, we'll acid dip even more. You know, we'll just be lighter than he is. At the first race of the year, Laguna Seca, our car was the last to go through tech inspection. And when we were finished, we asked John Tamanis, the chief tech inspector, whether he'd like to have a beer with us. He said, sure. We gave him a beer, and he relaxed and put his elbow up on the roof of our car and dented it. He said, boys, we've got a problem.
On the engine side, world-famous engine builder Keith Black was retained to build the team's race motors.
Keith Black was a genius. He was a drag racing specialist who turned to road racing to produce our engines. He never missed a beat. He made reliable engines. He made extremely powerful engines. It was the strong part of our car by far.
The Trans Am rules called for an engine no larger than 305 cubic inches. If the 340 could be shrunk down to this size and still make enough horsepower to be competitive with the Boss Mustang and the Z28, Dodge and Plymouth might just be fighting each other for the Trans Am title in 1970. We'll take it to the track when the American muscle car returns. Over a 2-month period, Mopar's would-be Trans Am racers had been stripped down, beefed up, and welded on until they were now ready for the track. From the stands, as they whizzed by at 150 miles an hour, the cars looked like the ones in the showrooms. But these were full-on race cars.
They do look stock compared to today's cars. They ain't. It was a terrible error to think of these things as being stock in any way. As I said, the whole body had been through the acid bath. The engines were anything but stock. The transmissions and rear ends had housings that were made out of magnesium with a little metal glued on them so that when the tech inspector tried with his magnet, the magnet would stick to it. We cheated from the nose of the car to the tail of the car.
Under the hood, a real miracle was taking place. Keith Black's engine shops had kept the 340's 4.04-inch bore, but had de-stroked it to 303.8 cubic inches. Thanks to the special Trans Am block, which had beefier bottom end, the main bearing web was re-drilled for 4-bolt main caps. A cross-drilled crank and forged rods were good to 8,500 RPM. And the engine was kept alive with a better oiling system. The new heads were treated to a port job, and the valve train was beefed up with Hemi rocker arms and shafts. With a single Holley 4-barrel carburetor, the engine now dynoed at over 460 horsepower. Plymouth rolled out its 2 racing Cudas for Swede Savage and Dan Gurney. Simultaneously, Dodge's Challenger entered the fray with Sam Posey in the driver's seat.
To be able to race against Mark Donahue, Parnelli Jones, and George Fulmer, and Sweet Savage, my special friend, and Dan Gurney, I mean, this was fantastic stuff.
With all the chips on the table from Ford, Chevrolet, American Motors, and now Chrysler, the 1970 season was a brawl from start to finish. At stake were the pony car bragging rights and millions of dollars in car sales. Thanks to this, the Mopar teams had some interesting rules to live by.
If the engine blew up and parts were littered all over the place, you'd come in and you'd say, stuck throttle. Or you'd come in and you'd say, the transmission let me down. Or you'd come in and say, the rear view mirror fell off. But you would not say, the engine blew. Chrysler engines never blew.
Trans Am races were wild and crazy affairs. Gary Savage relives this excitement today as he vintage races his father's restored AAR Cuda.
Laguna Seca, which was the first place I drove it, you come over the crest there and the thing's squirrely all over, trying to keep it going straight into the corners, and coming down the corkscrew, which is a famous corner there. It was just something that you can't even see past the hood on these things. You're sitting down low, and all you see is the big hood, and you see the trees. So you kind of just point at the trees and you drop off the corkscrew, and you hope you're in the right place.
Neither the Cuda nor the Challenger posted a win in 1970. Suddenly, the season and the Cuda and Challenger's Trans Am racing career was over. The AAR Cuda and the Challenger TA take their place today as two more examples of the extremes to which American car companies were willing to go to claim the performance market as their exclusive territory. There are probably several hundred of these cars still around today. And in the muscle car hobby, very few cars are as prized or as respected as these little road rockets.
The legacy that Chrysler's Trans Am cars created continues to this day. It's amazing. I don't think anybody expected the reputation to last decades after the racing series ended.
Thanks for watching, and please don't crush them, restore them.